Hello, everybody. This episode is a recording that Mary and I had during the first weeks of quarantine. We wanted to share this episode with our listeners as it was really the birth of this podcast. We talked through our fears and how we can all move through the effects of COVID 19. Supporting community minded business has always been a passion for both of us. And as we unpacked this talk, we realized that we wanted to continue to support business for now and for when we are on the other side of COVID, whatever that might look like. We're in this with you, and we look forward to walking with you side by side. So here you go, episode 2 of the Third Place podcast. Cheers. Hello, everybody. Welcome to just this brief webinar about COVID-19 and as shops and restaurants, kind of what we can be doing to address it. And while this is a stressful time for most people, there can be some opportunity. So my name is David Gaines. I own La Terza Coffee. We're a coffee roaster in Cincinnati, Ohio. And we supply, our DNA is to supply independent coffee shops and really just give a lot of best tools and practices for how to be successful in that coffee shop space.
Yeah, thanks, David. My name is Mary Aller. David and I came together when I worked at the T-Spot, and I was there for about 5 years running business development and as the general manager. And prior to that, I ran a coffee shop as well as a tea shop. And so this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, as well as having now been in a consulting world where I'm helping startup companies in the beverage space, specifically in coffee and in tea and even hemp. And this is very prevalent for a lot of the startups as their products are not getting brought in at this time, as well as the coffee shops that we work with as we're their vendor, and understanding how to best support them as we transition and explore this interesting and somewhat crazy or extremely crazy time. So David and I are really honored to be able to just sit down and have a little bit of time to discuss some of the things that have come up for us in the past couple of weeks, and want to make this available to you as you have a little bit of time on your hands.
Yeah, we broke down the content based on 5 big segments. One, really just addressing the fear that we all have. The fears are real and valid. So we want to just be honest with that and hold space for that. A lot of people are trying to wrestle with just survival. How do I get to the other side of this? Whether that's 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, hopefully not any longer than that, but what can we be doing just to get to the other side? What are maybe some best practices people are using to get to the other side? As well as 2 other segments. One, what is creative thought that can be going around this space? There are some opportunities to use this time wisely. Maybe you've always wanted to update your flow of your cafe or bar. Now, with a lot of limited hours or less work or being closed, maybe this is a time to do that if you have the resources. So exploring some creative work in this space. And then finally, just ending with some hope, because we will all see this through. And there are ways that collectively we're seeing just humanity come around each other. Here in Cincinnati, so many people have been so supportive of our coffee shops and are aware that there's a role that the entire community plays in helping small businesses survive. So I think that there is some hope that can be discussed too. As a race of people, we've been through this kind of thing before, and this is usually when humanity steps up and comes together. So just to get started, fear. Here it is. We have so many fears that exist, and fear at its core is a good thing. Like, we need fears to help us think through worst case scenarios. We need to name them so we know how we can begin to rationally think through them and address them and problem solve. And yeah, as we come up with plans will change. One of the things that's really caught me with the whole COVID virus is not only is it a day-to-day thing seem to be changing, but hour to hour things are changing, which changes plans as we go. So having fear is really healthy. And so let's start with that and talking through the different fears. But at the other end of it, the fears really do help us focus in on what the next steps are and unpacking what long-term goals are as we work through fears, putting them on the horizon and beginning to walk towards them. You know, how do we get, like, if this is a 2-month thing, how do we get to June 1st? You know, and then starting to unpack that. And that right now, that might be the long-term goal. And in long-term planning, we also have to understand that there's short-term goals. If June 1st is the other side of this, that's great. How do we get to the end of this week, or even how do we get to the end of today? So by having the long-term goals, it lets us set the horizon and kind of know where to steer the ship. But then, you know, the short-term goals kind of being what the steps are needed to take to get to the other side. So just naming fears and they're real is, I think, a really big first step for so many people.
Yeah, I think that what's been interesting is that last year was a bit of a frenzy. I think the theme has been that most people were in a bit of a stage of grief where the old normal was transitioning to a new normal. And I'm finding that the new normal is starting to come to light this week. I know that that's telling in my household. And as someone that, you know, works remote on occasion, but now is working remote with, you know, my partner, as well as a toddler that is out of school, it can be really triggering to me, especially because I already struggle with some general anxiety. And so it brings to the forefront all of the things that we're all working on day by day, but now we're faced with more time and space to deal with that, and also more triggers. So, you know, coupling those two things, there's a lot of routes that we can take. And, you know, fear comes from a place of really trying to understand and recalculate and find a new homeostasis and be able to ground ideally. The nervous system right now for most people is a bit out of whack, and we need to take advantage of this time to drop into the parasympathetic. And I remind myself of the parasympathetic as the pair of rest and digest, and that those two crucial parts of the nervous system are in prime mode when we can ground and when we can get out of frenzy. And part of that is naming the fear, allowing the fear to exist and not to dispel it or push it away, but give it space and give it room to breathe and know that fear exists because it helps us in survival mode, which is that sympathetic. So we're all in a bit of sympathetic and survival mode. And there's some things that I've personally been practicing that I wanted to share with everyone, a couple really, really easy grounding practices while also staying isolated. And one of those is water therapy. A lot of people don't know that it can be really, really simple to recalculate and get blood back out of your extremities and into your heart and into your mind through ending a hot shower, ending a hot bath in a cold wash over your body. That actually just is a flushing, and it also is quite a grounding, and it brings blood flow back. And another thing is very simple meditations. There's a ton of resources right now that are free, that are supporting in meditation. Oprah and Deepak Chopra just started a 21-day free meditation support online. That's something that you can tap into. And if you've never done it, you know, having something that's guided and trying to find even 2 minutes to find your breath can be really supportive. And then two other things that have been supportive to myself and my family is simply finding a moment to put your feet on the ground and especially the earth. If you are not able to do that because you're maybe in an apartment that doesn't have a yard and you're stuck at home, you can still envision that. It's just as powerful if you are able to have a bare foot on any sort of structure or grounding. And then finally, schedule. I know it's so basic, but it's been so impactful for my family. Last week, it was madness. We were constantly trying to juggle one priority to the next, and it was telling in how my toddler responded. He's such a mirror for us, where his attitude and his emotions reflect ours. And so last week was hard, and it goes in waves. But this week we've started to implement a bit of structure. I'm in my basement. I made myself a little bit of a home office, as I just showed off to David. And it's so simple, but it's been really, really helpful for me to be able to segment and compartmentalize time a little bit. And it also is really nice to be able to exhibit that and embody that for my toddler. And they're learning valuable lessons in this time as well. So just wanted to share a couple tools that I think are really easy to implement in this time where we're feeling like maybe a lacking of tools or the conventional tools like going to the gym or the routine that we used to have, and want to express that David and I are always brainstorming different ways to implement self-care even before COVID. So know that we're a resource to brainstorm with you in this time.
Yeah. I think that structure is a great point, because even within our business and employees, last week was all over the map, right? And we're just trying to figure all this out. And again, information is coming so quickly. And here we are on Tuesday of the next week, and it feels like we're starting to get into a new normal. But last week was a lot of brainstorming. For us, this is actually a great segment. It was survival with our team. So the first thing we did, and just even as leaders of the organization of our coffee roasting business, one of the things that we wanted to do is bring the team in very quickly to the conversation and just even have honest dialogue. I honestly put a meeting together to talk with the team, anticipating a 50% drop in sales. And, I don't know if I'm going to be above that or below that. We're still kind of too early to tell, but to bring that information to the team so that we could quickly collectively come up with a solution. And I didn't know what would come out of it, how people would respond. It was actually a beautiful thing, though, because we have a relatively small team, 6 of us full-time and several other part-time folks. So of the 6 full-time people, one person is relatively new. So she walked in the meeting and assumed that, well, I'm kind of the low man on the totem pole. Clearly my job is going to be eliminated because our business is well established and we're making money and we're growing on all those kinds of things, but we're not established enough or don't have enough assets and resources just to float a team either. So we had an honest dialogue, brought the team into it, and the team collectively came up with a decision that they would all rather see their hours cut because the person that I referred to, she's single income, had just gotten her personal finances settled in as someone who got a stable job, has a job that she now loves, and was going to be, or just was feeling like she's going to be devastated knowing her job was going to be eliminated. We went into the meeting with just the idea to talk through what our personal finances were. And after the team meeting ended, everyone else on the team saw their needs personally and realizing that they were in pretty good positions. And they independently came to me after the meeting to say, hey, I'd rather see my hours cut and my pay decrease in this temporary time so that we can make sure that our newest employee is taken care of, because she needs this job more than we do right now. So in a beautiful way, the team collectively came together to support kind of the person that needed it most. But that all began with just being honest, and addressing the fears in a group, addressing that we had these goals of just getting through. Thankfully, we can see, and just in the other parts of the world that are going through this as well, that there is hope. We will see this at an end to this. So, so knowing that helped get to the decision as well. But it all began with just an honest look at everything.
I love that story because David also then shared with me the impact of that conversation with this team member, and it was an emotional one, seeing how if other situations and other employees have not been given the time yet to discuss this survival mode and what that looks like for each individual, that is something that I think needs to happen. And in my personal experience, I dove into contract work in the last 6 months, and 6 months ago was laid off from a company. And so hadn't even gotten my feet under me, and immediately lost about 75% of what we were anticipating. And talk about fear. But then what helped us was truly addressing that survival. Like, what does survival look like? And what does the definition of surviving versus thriving look like? And really bringing that thriving into the conversation of survival too, that there were things that we are able to in other companies and other people that I've spoken to that we're finding abundance in different ways that are not necessarily monetary, and seeing all of these companies come through right now with supporting with delaying mortgage payments or not ensuing any sort of late fees has been really inspiring. And I think that if, I imagine that a number of you tuning in at this time have had to make some hard decisions, whether you've been able to keep staff at a lower rate or had to let some staff go. A couple of clients that I lost, I'm not sure that they're going to survive the runway of this at all, because I work with startup companies. And so the reality of that and the emotion that has surrounded that has been really intense. But when we sit back and think, okay, what are the baseline needs that I have, and how can I defer, and sitting down and rebudgeting, and just knowing and hearing all of these stories has been helping me to anchor in that hope, while understanding that this is a time for survival, but there's so much more thriving actually in this. It's just that we're redefining what our baseline needs are and how to meet those.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we name the fears too, like we've had so many coffee shops open in the last 6 months. They literally just opened,
Right.
and have very little runway to survive. So the fears, worst case scenario, I think it's always really helpful to start with that when you name through the fears. Most shops that have been in that space at the moment, they're actually doing great. Some shops have exceeded their sales mark because they're in communities where the people are very, very excited about supporting them, and they realize that there's this local contributor to their community. Other shops have decided to close the doors momentarily. So they're all looking at these different fears. And one of the things that has helped some shops think through it is, well, worst case scenario, I'm out of business. That I think is the most extreme in this particular case. And obviously there's a lot of ramifications that go with that, including personal income. But when those fears were addressed, the shop owners have come to realize, well, wait a minute, especially there's one shop in particular, they opened, they did an initial investment of $60,000. Another shop, similar story, they were able to open with a $30,000 investment. And they've played out the fears. Okay, this is a 2 to 4 month window of hard work and for them, they've already addressed their landlord, and they're trying to figure out what does delaying rent look like. And even if they close their doors, the conclusion that they've come to is, well, wait a minute, I invested $60,000. I put sweat equity into building this thing out. If I just put a pause on it for the moment, and they haven't, but if I just put a pause on this for the moment, my monthly expenses are only an additional $6,000 for a 3-month window of time. And while they're not in a position to invest another $6,000, they already invested 60, and thinking through personal budgets and bootstrapping and really honing down on all the expenses, they were able to realize that they had more than they realized, and 6,000 isn't that much of a hurdle to get through. So that's what an exercise looks like. And naming out the worst possible scenario, well, it's not that bad, certainly not something that you want to go through.
Right.
But it's it's manageable, and you can start to unpack all of it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect segue into all of the best practices that we've learned about in the last couple of weeks and sharing those. You know, some of the like very straightforward ones include going to the SBA loan, the Small Business Association, and going through that application process, deferring rent or asking for lower rent, because a lot of those landlords don't want to find another tenant. They're having their own sort of struggle at this time. So it's hitting everyone. And that's what's also kind of beautiful, is we're connected in this in a very odd way, but it can support these challenging conversations. In Colorado, so I'm in Colorado, I'm just outside of Boulder, Colorado, kind of in between Boulder and Denver. And, you know, last week everyone shut down, and some of the best practices that they did was just a deep clean and supporting that. And then really pivoting and focusing on online sales has been huge. And I've found that it's really cool to see that in this time, the creative thought and collaboration has come through, where people are really thinking, okay, how can I make my business model more sort of buttoned up and capable to hit so many different verticals and meet my customer where they're at. I mean, right now they're at a place that they weren't. If you were a shop where people were coming in on their commute, that looks completely different now. So meeting the customer where they're at and really listening to them. A lot of the shops out here have even done some surveys because they don't know the answer. And they've reached out to their community on social media, or even putting posters out that if they were to happen to walk by, to then engage with them in a digital way and give them that information so that they can pivot. And what's a blessing about these small companies and small coffee shops is that pivoting is what we're the best at. So we get to show off our capacity to pivot and to address and change our business model overnight. It's only been 2 weeks that we've really been feeling this, and people have already changed their business model overnight and met the customer in that way. So they did deep cleans, and then a lot of them have reopened and then done to go and curbside only, using digital forms of communicating rather than cash exchanges, credit card only, increasing employees hourly, but cutting back hours to sort of compensate for the tip heavy environment. And now it's changing again, where in Colorado, we're looking at maybe non-essential being shut down altogether. So, you know, I think it's just this, it's like the ocean, it comes in waves, and we're just trying to stay afoot and stay standing. And now it's really leaning into some of what David and I will discuss and hear in a little bit after he shares some best practices, which is thinking even more creatively than just these quick pivots, but saying, how can you then utilize this time, and how can you maintain your employees and help them have some living wages and whatnot. Right. David, have any other best practices that you want to share that I didn't address there?
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation just a couple hours ago with one of our accounts. They've been to go and curbside, and they've been ultra lean as a team. So right now they have 3 employees that are managing everything, and the manager was just telling me that they've learned so much in their processes and efficiencies. They literally just opened 2 months ago. No one saw this coming, but because they've had just 3 people working and kind of fulfilling all their orders, they found all of these holes in their systems. And they likely would have found them over time. But when they do reopen, they're going to be so much better at what they do. So, you know, again, no one wants to go through this, but they were really able to use this time in an effective way and keep their eyes open. I think you bring up such a great point. Small businesses, way more than big business, can pivot so quickly. And so this is really a great time to be thinking of how to be lean, how to be super efficient, and things like that. So we've seen some of our shops that have retail presence or gift card to help supplement with their teams that have less hours or even no hours. All gift card sales and retail sales have 15% has gone towards tip funds, so there can be at least some of a supplement for employees. So that was a pretty cool best practice that we saw. So I think that there are some out there.
What about that that new practice that you brought in as a roaster and distributor for your coffee shops? Because I felt like that was something that would be worth sharing as well.
Yeah. So just we've been brainstorming as well. So we're going through our own. We're kind of following this platform as a roaster. One of the things that we realized is the barista community really is hurting, and the serving community is really hurting. So we have most of our accounts have a house blend. Actually, we were able to incorporate even those that don't. We asked them to pick their favorite single origin that we have. And right now is not a time for us to make money. We will survive. We're big enough where we know that we're going to get to the other side. But what we wanted to do was anyone that has a house blend, we created a page on our website where people could buy that house blend's coffee. So even if someone lives out of town, they can order coffee, and then every bag, $5 of every bag of that coffee purchase goes to that shop. For some shops, that's going to be just that might be enough to get them to the other side. For some shops, they know that they can get to the other side, but that they can put that towards an employee fund. So it's all of our profits are going straight to the shops, but everybody wins. One, as a roaster, we've been able to, shops have been super grateful. So we have clients, they're already clients for life, but this just solidifies that relationship in terms of gratitude. Two, the barista community wins and the shops win. So this gives them a little bit of a boost. We've done all the work to take it off their plate. So it's just, they can just share a link on our website and then we'll handle all the fulfillment. And then three, the customer wins. If you order 2 bags or more, you actually get free shipping. So the customer gets coffee that, they don't have to worry about going to the grocery store. It delivers straight to their doorstep. So they're buying coffee anyway, and this gives them an avenue to support their favorite local coffee shop. And then actually there's a fourth thing for us, we're just trying to get hours. So we're selling our coffee with zero profit, but we're not selling it at a loss. So the cost of the green coffee, the cost of the packaging, the cost of the labor to fulfill the order is covered in that purchase model. So that does keep my team employed too. So we win in that way. But it's been a really great initiative, and it's something super easy that shops have been able to just share on their social media. And now they can have an additional layer of support.
Right. Yeah, I spoke with a co-manufacturing facility out in California yesterday, and they're on total lockdown, right? Where if they cross the bridge, they have to take their temperature. And so their manufacturing has adjusted so greatly, where they used to run 8-hour shifts, standard 8 to 10-hour shifts, and they've shortened that down to 6, just so that everyone is getting some hours, cutting back about 20% or so. But that something that I found that was unique, that I'm curious how that's impacted you as running a production facility and roasting, is that they have about 2 of those 6-hour shifts are really revolved around sort of incoming and outgoing safety measures that did not exist prior. And so it's been really quickly changing your protocol and having limited staff and all of these other things where it's almost like it's demanding that even small businesses start to operate as if they are large companies, which I think can be a blessing in disguise, because I think all of us know that there's not enough time to put in some SOPs and make those really buttoned up processes that we always want to do. And, wondering your direct relationship with that, David, and then I feel like we could dive into some of the creative opportunities of this space of time as well.
Yeah, without question. I mean, right now we're more diligent about everything. We have put in these standard operating procedures towards cleaning more diligently. We've rearranged our cafe a little bit. We realized that, we have a lot of retail coffee available, and people were coming in and smelling the bags. We're like, oh wait, we can't really do that anymore. So we had to move it behind the bar, and we
Mm-hmm.
went from a self-serve coffee station to a behind the bar coffee station. I mean, we anticipate moving some of those pieces back, but we're just hyper aware of how important it is to be clean, and to now put these procedures in place. And I'm sure some of them will bleed over into the other side once we get back to normal.
Well, and it sounds to me like a much more hands-on customer service relationship than some of this passive relationship, like maybe someone grabbing a bag. It becomes an opportunity for a conversation with the staff or the barista when they're physically having to handle it until that exchange happens. So something cool too, that a blessing in disguise, that it's helping train another layer of customer service that is far more like kind of white glove than it was prior.
Right. Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So this is a time to be creative. We have space. We have time to implement practices and do things that we hadn't. One of my friends who works in the medical esthetician space is they are getting hourly pay to finally revamp their website because they've been talking about it for 2 years. They are reworking some of their training documents. They're doing team building exercises. Even though they're remote, there's this opportunity to really come together and start to do some personality tests and learn about each other. And especially in this time where right now everyone is a bit raw and stripped down. So you will get to see the most authentic version of a person when there is an element of fear. And that is an opportunity, especially for leaders, to be able to create a safe space. You know, Google has a resource out there that talks about the best teams and what are the characteristics of the best teams. And usually it comes down to getting basic needs met, but having safety is the most important thing. And a lot of us are not feeling safe. So there's a way to create a safe space by just going back to having the conversation like David did with his team, talking about survival, understanding how this is triggering people, and holding that space for them to be able to name it and then work through it as a team. And it could create bonds that I think we're going to see less attrition, not to mention the job market is also obviously suffering. But I foresee this as a way of creating a familial environment within companies more so than before, because it's just like having the blessing of conflict resolution. This is the epitome of conflict resolution, and allowing leaders to really show up for their team members, and then to not forget, which is something that David and I spoke with a couple other coffee shop owners just the other day, that that's a tall order. And that in leadership, you are in the spotlight and you're on stage, and you're also feeling a sense of fear and survival, and you're holding space. So having resources where you can speak to fellow coffee shop owners. There are shared bartering sites right now. There are shared processing sites. There are shared email lists coming together to be able to support self-care and have that listening ear so that you can then be available and capable to be there for your team and allow them a sense of trust and safety is crucial. And I think that we're going to be really finding how strong our networks are as well in this time.
Yeah. One of the things that when we do coaching for shops that open, and a lot of the content at the beginning is around strengths and weaknesses of not only the owner, but of the team. And then doing deeper dives, like we really love the DISC assessments and the like Myers-Briggs tools of personality. So, as a leader, maybe this is something that that you've wanted to do, is just do a little bit deeper dive into who you are, what your wiring is, how you process information. And now, again, we're all so raw right now. The emotions that you feel is probably the truest version of yourself available. So
for better or for worse.
Yeah. So now's a great time to take time to do a deep dive, maybe to read a book on like the Enneagram and to understand yourself a little bit more. We use a tool called Cloverleaf. The website I think is cloverleaf.me, but it has all the personality types on it. And the beauty of that tool is that everyone in your team can take this assessment and then it maps your entire team on top of each other. So very similar to some DISC assessments, and DISC is one of the personality profiles that they work through, but you can see your entire team. So this is something that I've been wanting to do with our team for quite a while. We've taken some DISC assessments in the past, but I wanted to do a little bit more complete assessment, like understanding the Myers-Briggs component, understanding Strength Finders. One of the tools that Cloverleaf created that's their own is just team culture and understanding the values that each person has with that. So this has been something that's on our radar. We've been in super growth mode lately, and we've never had the time to do it. Well, that is something that we have right now. And, you know, again, we're in a fortunate position where we're able to give the team members some space. But maybe this is a great time for you as a shop. You know, that team culture moment that we created, that was a lot of work to get there. And thankfully, we've been building the team culture for quite a while. So I wasn't surprised by the team. I was, but I wasn't either. We did a lot of work to create the culture. And when you do that work, it really does pay off. You know, so many owners are caught in being owner and operator. The best thing that you can do to transition to eventually being just an owner, and whether that's you want to open a second location, you want to do a different job, you want to retire and sell it, if you can work hard at creating the team culture, that makes your system so much more valuable. That gives you the opportunity to be able to walk away. So maybe now's the time to be able to invest in that. I think the core idea that drives me just in terms of the creativity is there's a sentence like, this is causing the world to change. From this moment on, the world is going to be different. And we can either say it in a negative or a positive. Wow, from this moment on, the world's going to be different. And it's negative, and you let your mind wrestle in that kind of negative space. Or, wow, the world is going to be different, and there's some opportunities in that too. And I think there's always going to be a tension between both. Like we do need both to wrestle with. But if we can land more often in the positive version of it, the world is going to be different. That this is an opportunity to do something and think through efficiencies and think through team culture. The more businesses that can do that and create the space for that, those are the ones that are going to see the other side and be better on the other side too.
Well, it makes me think of, I saw, you know, everything on social media, all the memes and everything is it can catch you and you think it's hilarious, and the next moment it can be too real, whatever it may be. But one thing I saw, it was like, you know, if this sort of lifts and we start to feel a sense of relief from this before summer, it's going to be a really fun summer. and just thinking to myself, like, man, things don't feel as sweet without the sour. Yep. So I get really excited thinking about, you know, even my personal journey of being laid off and what perspective that's given me. And I have to remind myself, it's like a Sour Patch Kid. First it's sweet and then it's sour. Maybe the opposite. It's sour to sweet, and it just brings so much more life and enjoyment to things, and that it can be a gift and it can have purpose despite the challenge, and that this is a total opportunity for us to find a new way of being and a bit of slowing down. Even if we slow down, if the new way was a 1% dialing back globally, the impact that that's had on our climate and on everything, to me, is undeniable, and something that I will encourage and embody throughout. I mean, I will also tell you, I only take 2 plies of toilet paper now, no question, you know? So just the little things where I think to myself, I'm like, man, if people are stopping for a second and muscle memories are getting redefined, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That triggered 3 thoughts. One, social media. If you don't have a great social media presence, now's also a great time to invest in that. People are more engaged in social media now. And, you know, we know that social media has its place, and there's some negative that goes with it. In some ways, we're able to connect more with a lot more people, but in other ways, we're connecting less deep. But the social media platforms that we have, including like this technology of a Zoom call or a barista community or a shop owner community, there's so many great social media platforms that exist that keep us connected. You know, this thing has happened before. In 1918, the Spanish flu went through the country, and we had to go through social distancing to get past it. And one of the things I keep reflecting on is, man, thank God we have all these social media tools right now, because we're able to connect still, even though we're not able to physically connect. There's still a version of connection, and it's just an amazing time. So social media might be something, a creative thing that you can be working on.
One quick thing, because someone actually said something and it resonated with me, is that it's not even social distancing, it's physical distancing. And that sort of reframing that, because we're connecting now, we're socializing now, that it's physicality really that has changed for us, not the social aspect.
Yeah, so that's really special. I had the same thought this morning. I was taking a shower, and I'm like, this summer is going to be so amazing. It's going to be so much sweeter. Everyone is going to go outside so much more. Everyone's going to enjoy a baseball game or whatever so much more. For whatever reason, that's how this life works. There are no peaks without the valleys. So this is a valley without question, but the peak is going to be so much sweeter when we get to the top. So that's cool. And then there was a friend of mine, she actually led us in a team exercise about a year ago. So she does a lot of corporate consulting. And there's this phrase that we say, and we throw it around all the time. Well, I'm going to give it 110%. And she like paused, like someone in our team said that. And she goes, you know, that's not possible, right? We literally can only give 100%. And in fact, 100% feels like 110%, probably where we should be operating almost all the time. And any business might need us to ramp up to 100%, but that's like, it's like a car. You know, a car can go up to 6,000 or 7,000 RPMs. That's not where we drive. We don't keep it in third gear and drive on the highway. We know that will destroy the car and the life of the car.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Right. So if we are thinking that 100% is what's normal, then that's our red line. And we shouldn't be pushing ourselves. We shouldn't be pushing our employees to get to 100%. Are there seasons? Absolutely. But maybe 80% is the new normal. And maybe we need to get rid of that phrase of going 110%. And so I think you're right. Like maybe now is a time. That was another thought this morning. Like I'm personally starting to cut my hours and see that, right? And so there's this space, like, will I get to be outside more with my family and cherish those moments? There's tons of projects at my house I've been pushing off, and now I have space to do it and to savor those moments too. So maybe there is this new normal of space that we need to create for the other side.
And it's also proven, you know, research shows that even doing an 8-hour day is not the most efficient use of a day. So there's only so much that that creative and flow can come from, and at that point, otherwise, usually the adrenals are stressed, and it impacts itself in your physical body or your spiritual body or whatever it may be. But we feel it. We're all feeling it, and also in this time when you're first now having a moment of breath, you might also feel your body recognizes that it gives itself room to let maybe some illness come up. And I'm sure that can be terrifying, because I know a lot of people now, their springtime allergies are coming up and they're confused around the symptoms, or because they're in a little bit of space where they didn't have prior, and the sort of last week panic has surpassed to a point, they're feeling some fatigue. And so there's a lot of symptoms that are just natural. And I want that to like be named, that this is a part of the body's way of saying, hey, like, oh, like kind of having a sense of gratitude by allowing it to manifest some symptoms that can move through, rather than sit in there stagnantly and don't get the room to actually simply breathe. So, you know, we've kind of come to a point where David and I are ending this conversation and feeling like we hope that this was a helpful conversation to address sort of the stages of this transition that we're in, and that we feel honored to be able to have conversations like this and to be able to make it available to you, and that we would hope that you can feel like we could be a safe space for you, if you're a leader or if you are someone being led. And if you would like any of the resources that we spoke to, we're happy to share that with you. And this is also the start of us really hoping to create more content like this to be able to make resources for coffee shop owners and business owners and small business owners and entrepreneurs and creatives and curious individuals to spend some time in really grounding in some of this work and dialing back that 1%.
Yep. So we hope to continue to be a resource just for this time and for the future, just to keep unpacking and being a little bit better and more efficient and more connected in this new space. So I know that for us, these practices put into place have really just enhanced all the work that we're doing. And so we're grateful for the space that you've given us.
Thank you, and wishing you lots of wellness.